Hi everyone, happy Black History Month. And because it's Black History Month, I think this is good for the topic of this video. A good old friend of mine from back at Prairie View when we were in the marching band together messaged me and with a private request saying, hey, can you make a video about your experience being Black in Japan? And I'm like, sure, that's something I think about very often that I'm well aware of. And, it means a lot to me because it was one of the things that concerned me a lot before I made the decision to come abroad. And after having met many other Black people, and not just other Black people, but many other foreigners, it's made me realize that, I did have a couple of misconceptions about the treatment of Black people in such a homogeneous culture and society like Japan is. So I'm just going to cover a couple of the things that people might be wondering about, different questions that people might have, and I'm going to base it on my personal experience. It's going to be for me what it's like living here in the Miyagi Prefecture. You can find a lot of other videos and blogs and things about how Black people as a whole are treated here in Japan. And one thing I will throw out there is every single person's experience is going to be different. That's the ultimate disclaimer. This is my personal experience. Some people might say, "Oh, you're misguided." Like, no, this is how I feel. This is my experience. This is what I've seen and what I've observed. So it's not really wrong, but it's not really right. It doesn't dictate, how everyone is, but it can give you an idea of what to expect or what you might see, just being done around here. So the first thing that people might be wondering is, are Black people discriminated against? And the answer to that question is both yes and no. We are discriminated against in the fact that we are foreigners, but not because necessarily because we're Black. And the reason why is because the Japanese mentality, at least with the older generation, is either you're Japanese or you're not. So it doesn't matter if you're Black, white, Korean, Chinese, if you're from Pakistan, if you're Indian, if you're Filipino, it's like the Japanese and the not Japanese. So after it registers in their mind that you are a foreigner, that's when they'll start going through the different categories of what type of foreigner you are. So, if I'm walking down the street with a guy from Sweden, the first thing they're gonna notice is, oh, two foreigners. And then they'll start processing the information of what kind of foreigners we are. They just recognize we're not Japanese first. So, with that being said, I've never experienced any negative, straightforward, outward discrimination against me. The closest things I've experienced to that are the typical thing that a lot of foreigners experience, and that's the going to a restaurant with a group of friends who are foreigners and having one or a few Asian people in the group, and the server will only pay attention, or they'll give the most attention to the Asian person or Asian people in the group because they feel more comfortable with them because they appear Japanese and they're not panicked, in their mind to try to understand or speak with a foreigner. So there's that, which is not really a malicious discrimination. It just kind of happens, and many of them do it subconsciously, so they don't realize that they're doing it. The other thing is, when I'm walking through Sendai and they have the promoters. So they're like people who are promoting a service, they're handing out tissues, or they are trying to promote their restaurant, like, hey, come to our restaurant, here's our menu. They're standing out there, they're wearing aprons or whatever uniform they have. And I noticed they pretty much act like I don't exist, or they try to avoid making any eye contact with me or anything. And I don't think it's necessarily because they don't like Black people. It's just they have a job to do, and there's almost no point in trying to make contact with somebody who probably does not speak Japanese. Like, I'm in the country, so odds are I know some Japanese words, but they don't want to take the risk. Even if they have seen me multiple times and know, hey, I live in this area. You've seen me come by here so many times. You never know. I might actually come to your restaurant if you tell me where it is. But I know where they're coming from on that. I know it's not malicious. So, there's no bad intent behind it. I just know they have a job to do and they don't feel they can get a profit out of me. So that I can understand. So, another thing that does happen is, once again, it's not really discrimination. It's dealing with children. Children are very innocent. They're very straightforward about how their feelings are, which is, you know, it's because they haven't learned, the Japanese ways of doing things, of like, you have your public face, to keep things, to keep the natural order of things, or really the societal order of things, and you have, your personal face, how you really feel about things. So they haven't learned to differentiate between when to use the two. So they're going to be very honest and very straightforward about things. And their behavior is going to dictate that. So, I mean, I haven't experienced the actual discrimination. I mean, one time I was walking in a convenience store and there were these two kids. It was a little girl, a little boy. They were brother and sister. And they saw me and they were like kind of running to hide because they wanted to look at me, because I guess they had never seen a foreigner up close, or maybe they had never seen a black foreigner up close, because pretty much most schools here in Japan are, especially in my area, are trying to they're trying to implement having more ALTs, more foreign English teachers in all the schools, so that the children are more exposed to other cultures and get more experience with a native speaker of English. So I'm sure they may have seen other foreigners before. They just may have not had the opportunity to get as close to a black one like me. I don't know. I don't know what those kids' lives were. I've never seen them again after that one time. But once again, wasn't malicious. It wasn't in bad intent. So I know that was, nothing wrong with that. They're kids. Another thing is, one time I was working with this little girl. I think she was in fifth or sixth grade, and this was at my special needs school. So I'm just like sitting next to her, and these kids are so innocent. They just, they'll just latch on to you if they like you as a person. And so I didn't mind her like holding onto my arm, but then I felt my arm starting to hurt. I'm like, what's going on? And I look and she was scratching me. And I was wondering, why is she scratching me so much? And I realized she was mesmerized by the fact that when she would scratch my skin, it would change colors. It was such an extreme. Like, you scratch my skin, which is brown, and it turns white. Like, that was probably a surprise for her. I just went ahead and let her do it because I know, I would be interested in the same thing. I've done it to myself when I was a kid, So once again, I don't see those as malicious. They're non-discriminatory. That's just people, just curious about it, and they're, just going about their lives. So there's that factor with it. Now, on the reverse side of things, even though it's not discrimination, I have gotten special treatment for being a foreigner. And, a lot of it is people trying to connect with me based on what sports I like, which they'll do that with any guy. That's just how it is. But, they'll ask me like, "Oh, what sports do you like?" And I'll tell them American football, because I'm not as deep into sports as I used to be, but I do know enough. So and football is the one I watch the most. So I'll tell them I like American football. I watch boxing sometimes, because if I say MMA, then I have to explain the whole thing, what it is. They might not understand me. So, just say American football and boxing, and, that's it. But, there's that connecting factor. And then music is the biggest one. Music is the biggest thing that people try to connect with me with because I'm black. And this is mostly like the younger generation. When I talk to older Japanese men, they try to connect with me with American music, but they use music that was way before my time, or is not a part of my direct culture. Like, it's not things that my parents would listen to. It's not things that I've heard on television. you know, um, a lot of it's folk music or musicals. I'm not saying anything's wrong with those types of music. It's just not what I've grown up with, not what I'm accustomed to listening to. So it's difficult for me to connect with older crowd, but with the younger crowd, they try to connect with me with, hip hop music. I've been asked, oh, do you like Tupac? Do you like Biggie? Do you like DMX? Ice Cube? And different popular rappers from like from the 90s. And it's helped me out to an extent because that's given me a connecting point. And also, there's a nightclub that I used to frequent. So one thing I really liked about that club is the cover charge, on the nights I would go was typically, 1,000 yen at the door. For anybody who doesn't know conversion, that's about close to $10. Not quite, but almost there. And I would get a discount. I could get in for 600 just because I was a foreigner. They'd see me like, oh, okay, so no ID check and a discount, and so it was good for me to, continue going there. I'm like, oh, there's another benefit for being black, being a foreigner here in Japan. I get into this nightclub for a lower price. I I love dancing, and they would always play music that I grew up with. So hip hop music from the 2000s era, from the year 2000 on into 2010, from that time frame, and even a few years after, because I knew the dances to those. I knew what the songs were, what they sounded like. I could at least lip sync all the lyrics, and it was a connecting point. I could hold down that club by myself because that was like my inner teenage years and my inner, all coming out. And the DJs really appreciated that. And that was a good connecting point with that. They're like, hey, can we add you on Instagram? Can we add you on Twitter? Can we, doing this and that and stay in contact? I'm like, sure. I got, I'm not really friends with them because I haven't seen them since I stopped going out, but it was still like been a good connecting point for me. And people will try to connect with you in terms of that whole, stereotypical things with you being black. So, do you like sports, sports, certain music, and, different things like that. In general, the only real negative thing I would probably have to say, or that I've seen towards black people here in Japan, has been the guys in Harajuku who are always kind of trying to sell and promote something. And to an extent, they kind of harass the women who are just walking through the street. But that's a different story altogether. But otherwise, the experience of being black here in Japan is, it's a great one. It's not bad. If you do decide to come over and visit, I guarantee you'll probably have a very good time over here. So if you have any questions for me about anything else about the experience, so please feel free to ask. And that's it for now. And everyone stay blessed, and I'll talk to you later.